Good evening, folks. Tonight we're going to go through Genesis 3 here, and I'm hoping I don't get too sidetracked tonight because there's something I really like talking about, especially as it relates to the Bible, and that's dinosaurs. Yes, it's pronounced dinosaur, S-A-U-R, not dinosaur, S-O-R-E. It's not a dino boo-boo. But in Genesis 3, we start talking about the serpent here. And as I was doing a little bit of research on the Hebrew and stuff, I got to looking at the various words. Hey, Anne Marie, we're doing a semi daily Bible study here, just going through the Bible as it comes up. But anyway, I was looking at the word for serpent, which is nakash, and then you have tanin, which is another word that's usually translated as serpent. And I got off on a tangent. So tomorrow I might take a break from Genesis and talk about dinosaurs in the Bible and dinosaurs in general and their coexistence with man. That's always a fascinating topic whenever I bring it up. Hey Wesley, welcome. Jennifer, man, I got a lot of people on tonight. I hit the right time, didn't I? So if you're interested, it won't be tomorrow night. Tomorrow night I got a thing. It is most likely going to be, well, you know what? I'll post up a kind of an announcement when I'm gonna do the dinosaurs in the Bible type thing, because they're all over the place. It's amazing where you will find the Bible talks about dinosaurs. It's not just Job. It's a lot of places. So tune in to that or be watching for that post for when I'm going to do the live on that. Tonight we're going to do Genesis 3. If you missed 1 and 2, those you can find those. The first one I actually did on my Swordmaster page, and then I shared it to my page. But I figured I would probably get a lot more interaction if I just did the live on my personal page and then shared it to my Bible commentary page, which is a Swordmaster publication. So Genesis, I'll be reading out of the King James, but I have both the King James and the ESV up for comparison, just in case something looks a little archaic and maybe a little bit confusing. So it says, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which Jehovah God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden?" So this word serpent here is the nachash. This is the typical snake or viper, or what we think of as the slithering thing. It's a smaller thing, but it's considered a beast of the field and not a creeping thing. And so, hey Wesley, we're looking at something here, and a lot of people think that at this time that the serpent. Hey Stephen, you caught me right at the beginning here. That the serpent had legs at the time. Don't know about that for a fact, but we do know that it did not go about on its belly the way that it does now. So anyway, so the serpent here obviously is the devil, and we are going to see allusions to this throughout the Bible. We'll eventually get into the idea of the devil or Satan as a great serpent or a dragon. In the Greek, it's drakon, and we see this in Revelation. There's some symbolism there that I don't want to get into tonight, but just this tying of Satan to this physical creature here, and the reason for it is because the serpent was subtle, it was wise, it was seen as a symbol of cunning and cleverness. And so hey Cruz, we're talking about Genesis 3 tonight, so glad to have you aboard. But all right, Stephen, enjoy your meal. So here you have the serpent shows up, and he goes to the woman. Hey Chad, welcome aboard. So he goes to the woman. He doesn't go to Adam. He goes to the female, and I'm going to leave it to you to draw conclusions about why. I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm not trying to get into the humorous side of like gender warfare or anything like that, but there are some differences between men and women. And I think that the devil is playing on those differences, and I think that's why he went to Eve first. Verse 2 says, "And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." Now we know from chapter 2 that this is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So Eve understands death. She understands the command. She understands that the moment that she touches the tree, and much less eats of it, that at that moment she dies. And she has to understand what death is. She has to understand what sin is. All of these things are part of what make it justifiable that she be condemned for her sin. If Eve cannot understand what sin is, if she cannot understand the consequences of sin, then it is unjust for God to condemn her and Adam for what they're doing. So, hey, Kathy, we're talking about Genesis 3 tonight, so thank you for joining us. And so she understands all these things. And the only way that she really could have understood death is if there was physical death available for her to witness, maybe some animals dying, certainly the vegetables and the fruits that they ate to sustain their life was something that they saw as death, they understood as death. So there's physical death as part of design. And as we talked about in Genesis 2, the idea of physical death was not a bad thing. It was not seen as a bad thing. It was part of the design. All it is a transition from this existence into the next existence. And that's all they would have seen it as. The badness of death that we see all the way up until Christ. The badness of death was that if you died lost in your sins, then that became a permanent state. That spiritual separation from God became a permanent thing, and you couldn't do anything about it at that point. So Adam and Eve definitely understood what death was. They understood physical death, and by implication, they understood spiritual death, which is what they would suffer the moment they die, even though there's a little bit of confusion that the devil plays on right here. He's going to make an argument based on the difference between those two. Verse 4, "And the serpent said unto the woman, You will not surely die." Now there is a lie here. We know it's a lie. The devil is called a liar from the beginning. So he is lying, but he says, You shall not surely die. And it's a lie because he's going against what God had told Adam and Eve. He's going against what Eve just told him that God said. But he's trying to twist it. He's trying to say, you're not really going to die. You're going to be different. You're going to be awakened. You're going to have all this knowledge. You're going to be like God. But here, there's a kernel of truth. This is what makes lies powerful, is when there's a kernel of truth that, or maybe a shell of truth with a lie being the meat of it. Adam and Eve would not physically die immediately upon touching that tree. And they didn't. They didn't immediately die. But they spiritually immediately died. Okay, just like God said they would. Verse 5, "For God does know that in the day that you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Well, first of all, they already know good and evil. They understand what goodness is, what evil is. They understand sin. So Satan is kind of tempting them with nothing. But having things that are forbidden, things that when we look at sin and we look at the nature of sin, we're drawn away by our lust towards things that we think we want. That whole grass is greener idea. But if you really thought about sin, maybe some of us who are older and we've dealt with sin in our life, and we've dealt with maybe a a habitual sin, a thing that holds on to us, it eventually loses its luster. If especially if you've been fighting against something that you struggle against, you can fight against sin, and you realize that it's empty. There's not really anything there that should have enticed you in the first place, and that comes with maturity. But Satan is not really tempting Adam and Eve with anything that they don't already have, in the sense of being able to distinguish between good and evil. They already can do that. They know that they shouldn't eat of this tree, and they know the consequences for doing so. So they know good and evil. What the tree provides for them is just more commandments, more laws that they have to follow, and the knowledge of these different things that they could do that's wrong. It's like a child. How often do parents try to keep their children from learning about things in the world? We keep them from watching certain movies with sexuality in it, or with profanity in it, or with these adult themes that, let them be children, let them keep their innocence for a little bit longer. And it isn't that the kids don't know, hey, dad said don't do this, I'm going to get in trouble if I do this. They've got an early kind of understanding of what they should and shouldn't do after about 5 or 6. But we don't want to introduce them into this whole adult world. And so we insulate them, we keep them from knowledge. Well, that's what God is doing here. God has created a paradise. God has told them some basic rules and said, do these things. Don't do this one thing. And he left it at that. The only thing they gained by eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil was a whole bunch of other things that they really shouldn't do, that they probably wouldn't have occurred to them if they had never eaten of the tree. And it would not have been anything that would have enticed them. And what this says to me, it is, and I've been having this discussion now for weeks. I mean, I've been studying the idea for years, but just the last few weeks has been intense, is the idea of where does our sin come from, and the difference between inherited sin versus, is it just a choice that we make? Is there free will, and all those kinds of things? What this tells me is that sin is a learned thing. Sin is a learned thing. It is not inherent to us, but it is something that comes to us through observing other people, or through reading, or watching, or it's an external thing to us. It is not a natural thing for us. And so Adam and Eve started off, they did not have the propensity for sin, but they had to be convinced to sin by an outside source. And so the serpent, who is Satan, is convincing the woman here. And he says, "You'll not surely die, for God does know that when you eat of it, you'll be as or your eyes will be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Now, the expression here, "eyes shall be opened," the idea of light is associated often with knowledge. It's associated with authority. And so what Satan is doing here is he's saying, you're going to get all of this knowledge, you're going to get all of this stuff that's going to make you like God, who has all of this authority. So we'll expand on that, I'm sure, as we touch on the idea of eyes and light and whatnot as we go through the scriptures here. So verse 6, "And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food," so it looked tasty, "and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise." Did it really make you wise? No. Knowledge and wisdom are two different things. She thought it would make her wise because of what Satan was telling her, but really, with much knowledge comes much sorrow. That's what Solomon writes in the book of Ecclesiastes. And man, let me tell you, too much knowledge, it is a huge burden. And so anyway, she thinks that it's going to make her wise. This is how she views, this is her perception of the tree. So she takes the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave unto her husband with her, and he did eat. Now he has to know that this fruit came from that tree. Okay, it's a unique fruit, and that's the one command that God said don't do this. So he's got to know what that fruit looks like and why he shouldn't eat of it. And the eyes of both of them were opened, so they gained knowledge, and they knew that they were naked. Right, and that idea of knowing they were naked means that they understood what it meant to be naked, even though there's not anyone around. There's nobody else. It's just Adam and Eve and their husband and wife. That's not a problem, except that they are naked and walking around, and there's something that is a problem with that in terms of this idea of like public nudity. This idea of we should be wearing clothes. All right, Stephen says Revelation 3:17 from the New King James. Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. Yeah, very good. People who are conceited in themselves, they think they're all this, and they end up just being exactly the opposite of what they are. Especially the idea of blind. They don't have the knowledge that they think they have. So let's see here. This is a long one. Well, if I can hit the right button. Yep, I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed with the same, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. Yeah, absolutely. So this idea here that the church in one of the 7 churches of Revelation needed to have things given by God to be able to see properly. They thought they could see. They thought they knew everything. This is the wisdom and knowledge of man, and it's really just blindness. And man, that is rampant everywhere. But then God says that if you trust me and you follow me and you take the gifts that I offer you, which can only be found in Christ, Ephesians 1:3, then it'll be like an eye salve, and you'll truly be able to see. So here, Adam and Eve, yeah, their eyes were opened and they knew a bunch of stuff, but it's like a child watching something they shouldn't be watching, and they gained a bunch of knowledge that they really should not have had. So yeah, I would definitely say that there's an association here with the idea of blindness and knowledge and seeing, and the source of the knowledge and whatnot. So definitely similar. All right. So they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of Jehovah God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. So this is their personal God. Jehovah God has this personal, direct relationship with him. They knew that God was around. So this is where that nakedness comes into being a problem for them. Before, walking with God in the garden, them being naked was not a problem. And just like now, a husband and wife in their own home, in their own room, away from everybody, it's okay for them to be naked around one another. So why would Adam and Eve feel bad about being naked? Well, because God's there walking with them. Jehovah God is walking there with them. And I'm going to toss this premise out here, and it's one that I'm going to have to sustain over the long term, because I don't really have anything specifically in this context to defend it. But I really think this is pre-incarnate Jesus. I really think this is theophany here. This is Jesus interacting with mankind as the theophany, as the go-between. We see this throughout all 66 books here, this idea of whenever Jehovah God is directly interacting with man, it's really Jesus himself. And so, he wasn't called Jesus at this time. He wasn't the human side. So Jesus isn't really the proper term, but this is God the Son at this point, I think is what we're seeing here. And so Jehovah God comes in amongst the trees of the garden, And Jehovah God calls unto Adam and says unto him, Where are you? And he said, I heard your voice in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. And God said, Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree where I commanded thee that you should not eat? And so, hey, sweetheart, just talking some Bible. So anyway, this is where this problem of being naked really comes from. It wasn't because Adam and Eve were naked with each other. It was because they were concerned that God the Son was going to be there walking in the garden with them, and they would be naked in front of him, i.e. naked in front of other people. And so God says, how do you know you were naked? Hey, Solomon, we're studying Genesis 3 right now. God says, how do you know you were naked? Did you eat of that fruit? Because that's the only way they could have known that being naked was a problem, is when the law was established for them. Before that, being naked wasn't a problem because there was no prohibition against it. Now they have a prohibition against it and a whole bunch of other things, like murder we'll see in Genesis 4 and whatnot. And so all of these things now are things that they're forbidden to do, and they're aware of it. They're aware of it, and their knowledge is just a burden to them. And so verse 10, he said, I heard your voice in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked. And God said, did you eat of the tree? And then verse 12 says, and the man said, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. Did he have an Adam's apple before he ate of the fruit? Yes, he had an Adam's apple because it wasn't an apple that he ate of. But very funny. My wife is a comedian. She's just here to troll me anyway. So notice what man does here. And this is just typical. And I want to say mankind, but I really want to just beat on the males for a little bit here. This is typical male behavior here. God, it's your fault. You gave me the woman, and she's the one that convinced me to eat of the tree. It is all on you, God. That's what he does. He blames God here. He doesn't take personal responsibility. Let's see. But if they are married, why was it a problem? It was a problem. I think you maybe missed it, Heather, because I was saying that it wasn't a problem that they were married and naked in front of each other. It was a problem because God the Son is walking there with them. And so having another person that isn't part of that marriage union and being naked in front of them, even though God sees us as we are, he knows everything about us. Just the idea that, oh my gosh, we're naked in front of somebody that's not my spouse, that's where they're fearful, and that's why it was a problem. So man here's like, God, it's your fault. You gave me a woman, and she's the one that convinced me. Well, own up, man. You made the choice. You decided to eat of the fruit. Maybe she came at you and batted her eyes, or maybe whatever. But whatever excuse Adam has, it's a lame excuse, because he made the choice. He ate. God didn't walk with them before the fall. I don't know about that. I would argue that this is something that they are quite used to. I'll have to find some. It's a good question, Solomon. I'll have to find some backup for it. I'm a little tired. I can't think of it tonight. It's almost 11 o'clock. So, but I'll. Heather, not as Jesus. It's called a theophany. Jesus is really what we call him after he was born of Mary. But God the Son, in his what we call pre-incarnate state, I would say Michael, but a lot of people will get confused and maybe even upset if I say that. I believe he was called Michael before he was born to Mary and named Jesus. So, but I just say God the Son. We know that all three members of the Godhead were there for part of creation. We know that from John 1 and from Hebrews that Jesus was very active and kind of the focal point for creation, that he was the one that was doing the main part of the creation and carrying out God's will. But all three members were there, so definitely he was there, and we see him interacting with mankind throughout the Bible, throughout the Old Testament, throughout the New Testament. So, all right. So verse 13, and Jehovah God said unto the woman. So he doesn't really acknowledge or reject what Adam says, but he just kind of goes with it for a moment. And Jehovah God said unto the woman, what is this that you have done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me, and I did. See, they're just playing the blame game. It wasn't reincarnated. It was a first incarnation. Carnal means flesh, in the flesh. So Jesus was not in the flesh before Mary. So there's no re about it. He was incarnated, but he was only incarnated one time. Before that, he was a celestial being. So, Michael, that's what Jehovah's Witnesses believe. Yes, I know that's what the Jehovah's Witness believe, Solomon, but I do not agree with what they teach about that. I believe 100% that Jesus is God. Right, they don't believe that Michael is God, and they don't believe Jesus is God, and they are absolutely incorrect on that. I believe that Jesus is God, that he is the Son of God. He is absolutely God. In fact, I've brought up Hebrews 1:8 to them a number of times. But I also believe I have an article. Michael is Jesus Christ. Believe it or not, I have an article about that. So don't get mad at me, Julian. But it sets up the defense that Jesus was Michael before then. So, yeah, exactly, Stephen. God is like, Adam, and Adam's like, but the woman, and then he's like, woman, he's like, but the serpent. Yeah, they're totally playing the blame game. But it's his same spirit, and that's what it means. Yes, it's definitely the same spirit, the same mind, the same person. It's just he wasn't incarnated. He was not in the flesh at this point in time, and does not enter into the flesh for the first time until it gets to Mary. Well, keep in mind, this is just the perception that Adam and Eve have. So it isn't necessarily actually sinful for them to be naked in front of God, who knows everything. But Adam and Eve have this whole new list of things that are laws and commandments. And so they are kind of new to this learning. And so they don't exactly get it right. They don't, their whole problem here is not having this deep understanding of sin and law and all that. They're like, oh my gosh, now there's these things we are not supposed to do, and we're naked. And that's one of the things we're not supposed to be naked in front of other people. And so that's their thought process are still very new to this, like a person who's new to, let's say, a new country or something. Oh, I didn't realize that what does that fully mean? I can't drive on that side of the road or something like that. So all right. So in verse 13, Eve says, the serpent beguiled me and I did eat. So Jehovah God says to the serpent, because you have done this. Now notice, God doesn't ask the serpent anything because he's talking to Satan. So Jehovah God says to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed above all cattle, above every beast of the field. Upon your belly you shall go, and dust you will eat of it all the days of your life. So now he's cursing the physical creature. Okay, so there's a physical idea, physical consequence that the serpent has to deal with, and then a spiritual one that is also talked about. And we're going to see that this is also true of mankind. So verse 15, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. It shall bruise your head, and you will bruise his heel. This is the first of all of the many prophecies about the coming Jesus. I will put enmity between you and the woman. So this is between Satan and the woman because that's where the interaction first happened. Yeah, that would be awesome. It would be perfect. Would love that. So the first interaction of sin here is between Satan and the woman, and so the enmity is between Satan and the woman here, and between her seed or Satan's seed. Now, what is Satan's seed? We talk a lot about the woman's seed, which we know to be Christ. Typically, when we talk about the seed of mankind, we talk about man as the seed, but we know that Jesus was born of a virgin. So this here is the first, not only the first prophecy about the coming Messiah, but also the idea of him being born of a virgin. But what is the seed of Satan? Anybody have an idea? Hey, Cameron, glad you could join us. We're about halfway through Genesis 3 right now. Let's see. Note they were vegan in a perfect world. Yeah, we talked about that, and when I talked about Genesis 1 and I think a little bit on Genesis 2, and we'll probably hit it again on Genesis 9. They were absolutely vegan in the perfect world. Absolutely so. What is Satan's seed here? Okay, this is offspring. We're talking about offspring here. I am saying right now that Satan's seed is, generally speaking, the people who choose to be enslaved to sin, those who follow after wickedness. Now, I know Solomon and some of the other guys that are watching here don't think this way, but for those of us who hold to free will and all of that, Romans 6:16 says that to whoever you yield yourself to obey, whether sin unto death or righteousness to, I believe it says God or whatever, but the seed or the offspring, who does Jesus say you are the sons of Satan to? Yes, even those who are disobedient to God, but there's somebody that Jesus very specifically calls the sons of the devil. And I believe it's the Jews. And I think that can be sustained very easily from Scripture. Solomon's asking, why would it have to be vegan if there was death before the fall? Because that's what God said. I don't know that it would have to be. Plant life is dying so that people can eat. What would happen if Adam and Eve didn't eat anything before the fall? They had all this fruit, they had all these vegetables, all these things that they could eat. What happens if they didn't eat? If they couldn't die, what would be the point of eating? What would be the point of the tree of life? And Solomon, I think I sent you that article, The Purpose of the Tree of Life. But the purpose, I think, of being vegan before is that under that protective canopy, the waters above the firmament that we read about in Genesis 1, is that you don't have the genetic degradation. You have this protective canopy, and the UV radiation just isn't messing with our genes. We're living to be 1,000 years old. There isn't any need for the added protein and the fats and the other things that come from animals in a lot study. And I know that there's proteins, and I know you can get fats from vegetables and from fruits and stuff, but it's less direct and it's less of it. So I think what happens is that because the protective canopy is gone, because our genetics are breatharian, right? Because that protective canopy is gone, and because our genetics are degrading, that God says, okay, now they need to supplement with animals. I think there's also a lesson in the idea of animals having to die. We're going to see here in just a minute that animals are seen as a sacrifice, that they're going to start being the type pointing to Christ as the sacrifice to cover sin. So I think that there was a need for the animals after the flood, but there wasn't before the flood. In fact, we don't even see animals. There's nothing that says that animals ate anything but vegetables and fruits before the flood. There's just no indication that they ate anything before that. This is a time period where God is saying, "Be fruitful and multiply." So it would make sense if God creates a few animals and then they immediately start eating each other. That whole fruitful and multiply thing is hard to do. But if we've got 1,500 years where animals are not doing anything but eating vegetables and fruit and multiplying, then later on, when they do start eating meat, because after the flood they need to, then you got huge populations. It's not a concern. Well, no, only Adam and Eve exist before the fall. So, in the sense of, did they pass away? No, of course not. But I still say that the implicative evidence, or the implication there is that there was, like, they could have died, their bodies would have suffered entropy, they had to eat, and the purpose of the tree of life. The tree of life, if they didn't eat of the tree of life, they would not have had perpetual life. If they couldn't die, if there was no physical death before the fall, there was no need to eat of the tree of life. It served no purpose before the fall, and then after the fall they were cut off from the tree of life, and so it serves no purpose after the fall. So what's the purpose of the tree of life? And I think that's the biggest evidence that there is physical death before. The idea that you have to eat those organisms, they have cells, they're living things. All of the plants, all of the fruit, all of that is living stuff, and so there's definitely physical death of some kind. Please tell people we can stop multiplying as a command. Yeah, it's getting crowded in places, huh? Is that what you're thinking? So to say that there was no physical death whatsoever, I think, is just eisegesis. I think it's just something that we're reading into the passage. So, all right. So anyway, as I said, I believe that Satan's seed here is specifically because we're talking about Christ and what's going to happen when Christ comes to the world. I believe that this is talking specifically between Christ and the Jews. So this is not just a prophecy of Christ. This is a prophecy of the Jews who were going to crucify him. Acts chapter 2 puts the blame of Christ's crucifixion squarely on the shoulders of the Jewish people. And it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. So it shall, that's the woman's seed, shall bruise Satan's head. That's his power. That's his strength in the world. And you shall bruise his heel. So what is Satan's real power? Satan's real power now has become physical death. He has taken hold of this idea of physical death and took something that was just a transition into the next world, and now he's turned it into a tool where if you have sin, you have and then you physically die. That's it. You've made your choice, and there's no going back. And so Jesus, when he is resurrected, he takes that away. He takes Satan's ability to make death a permanent thing. If you died and Jesus never came, you were lost, and there wasn't any way to get. Solomon, that's a different question. The tree of life in heaven. You're going to Revelation 22. I would get with Julian and talk about eschatology there. I don't know where he stands on it, but that's going to get way deep into a question that I'm not really wanting to talk about. That's the other end of the Bible. The purpose of the tree of life in heaven, I think, is metaphorical, is symbolic in Revelation 22, and I really believe it's more of a reference to the New Testament, to the Bible, rather than an actual tree, if you will. So I don't want to get more into it than that, because that's the other end of the Bible. Yeah, but I would argue with them, as I argue often, that's a command from the Old Testament. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We have multiplied, we have filled the earth. Mission completed. Absolutely. So, Uh, all right, so it shall bruise thy head. So Satan loses the power, his best weapon, death, and you shall bruise his heel. So Satan's going to seem to conquer Christ, the seed of woman, but it's a minor wound, as we can see, because Jesus is going to be resurrected from the dead. Satan's going to go from prince of the world to a roaring lion, a wild beast, just picking off the weak, and that's about all he can do nowadays. So now God turns to the woman, and he says, unto the woman, he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In sorrow you will bring forth children, and your desire shall be to your husband, he shall rule over thee. So here is the physical consequence for the woman. She is going to feel great pain during childbirth. She is going to bring forth a lot of children. I'm going to multiply your sorrow in conception. So this whole idea of the woman, because she's the one that brought the fruit to man and convinced man to eat, now she is going to have to be under his authority. She's going to have to she'll look to him for the just in the relationship. They're still complementary, but in the end of all things, the husband is supposed to be the head of the house for a number of reasons. And then to Adam, he said, because you have hearkened unto the voice of your wife, and has eaten of the tree which I have commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for your sake, and sorrow you will eat of it all the days of your life. So here's the physical consequences that mankind, that men faces. We have to work. We're the ones that have to go out, and we're the ones that are supposed to provide, and it's not going to be easy. It's hard work to get out there, and it's toil, and we don't always like it. Usually we don't like it. Kind of where I'm at right now. The job that I have has just lost all of its luster, but I got to feed the family, and this is just the way that it is right now, because thanks to Adam. It says, and thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to you, and it shall eat the herb of the field, and the sweat of your face shall you eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and unto dust you will return. So here, mankind no longer has access. Yay, Karis is asleep, that's awesome. Mankind no longer has access to the tree of life. He no longer can eat of it and have perpetual life. He has to work. He has to work hard. Supposed to. But in the end, it's not ever going to be enough. There's nothing. Not the work that man has to do to sustain his physical life is not enough to give him perpetual life. And the step in understanding here is that mankind cannot do enough to give himself spiritual life. He's lost access to spiritual life here, and there is nothing that he can do to work, to earn, to merit salvation. He cannot say, God, I've done this thing, you owe me this, or there isn't any way for mankind to labor and get back what he's lost once he sins. Adam couldn't do it. When we sin, we can't do it. There isn't anything that there's no labor that will allow us to have eternal life by ourselves. It has to come from God restoring us to him through grace. Most people don't understand what grace is. Everybody equates grace and salvation as if they're the same thing. They're not. It's a cause and effect relationship, and there's more to it than that, but that's kind of beyond the text that we're covering tonight. But I do want to say that what God is showing through the physical is the ultimately the spiritual reality. The physical curse that Adam and Eve are dealing with here are that in life there's going to be this toil, this work, and it's going to be kind of pointless in and of itself, because even if man works his hardest all his life, eventually it's not going to be enough. You're eventually going to die. Your physical body will return to dust. Now, that is the natural thing that our bodies would do anyway. That is a natural order of things. It is something that was supernaturally prevented by by having access to the tree of life. It was a perpetuating of life in a perfect sense, that God put this tree in the forest, or in the garden of Eden, that they could eat of it and they would never physically die because they kept eating of this tree. Well, now God's saying you're going to have to work to sustain your life. It's not going to be just given to you. Now you got to work, and it's still not going to be enough. And I think what he's doing here is he's teaching the spiritual truth that there is not enough work that man can do to obtain eternal life once he throws it away by his sin. All right, verse 20. So we're kind of past all the doom and gloom of the pronouncements here. And it says, and Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Obviously, she's not the mother of animals and plants and bugs and birds and stuff like that, but all living human beings. She was the mother of every human being. Now, here's an interesting thing. There's a lot of people, we get into this theistic evolution idea, which is nonsense, that the earth is old and there were other civilizations, and there was a recreation that took place, and where did Cain's wife come from? And there was this idea of Lilith and all of this nonsense. The Bible very clearly says that Eve was the mother of all living. So if you believe the Bible to be true, you have to take that statement as it is, that Eve was the mother of all other human beings. It's not. You can't get around that. You can invent whatever. You can go to rabbinical tradition, or you can go to mythology, or you can talk about all of these other external uninspired sources. But the reality is that the inspired writer Moses tells the Israelites here, Eve is the mother of all living. That's why she's called Eve. She's the Eve. She's the progenitor, in the sense of being the mother. So I don't know where they get all of these other people from, and all of this other day, age, and gap theory and all that nonsense. No, I love having you here. I'm glad you're here. You will probably ask questions that will challenge most of the people that would be here listening along with us anyway. Your perspective is so much different now. So, ask your questions, Bridgekeeper. I'm not afraid. But just be aware that I am coming from a particular paradigm. And so I may answer those questions in a way that reflects that. But we might talk a little bit deeper about it when we're not on Facebook or whatever. But no, I'm very glad you're here. Okay, so verse 21. Unto Adam also and to his wife did Jehovah God make coats of skin and clothed him. So animals had to die, and this is a fairly well understood thought now. I didn't hear it growing up. I didn't hear it until I was getting into college, and probably late college. But the idea here is that the plants weren't enough. The animals had to die to cover sin, because blood is really the only thing that can wash away sins. We read in Hebrews, I know where your perspectives come from. Okay, cool. We read in Hebrews that the blood of bulls and goats really can't take away sin, but this was a type, and it points to the New Testament antitype. So again, here we see a prefiguring of, or the type pointing to Christ as the Messiah that covers our sins and washes them away and takes away the sin. So verse 22, and Jehovah God said, behold, the man is become as one of us. Who's us? Well, again, there's this idea of, sounds pagan. There's this idea that God exists as three persons. There's, people say Trinity's not a biblical concept. Well, I'm sorry, but here it is. Yeah, you're totally trolling, I know. But here it is. Jehovah God is not talking to Adam and Eve here. And he is saying that man has become as one of us, clearly including himself as part of this. The speaker is including himself as part of this us, and to know good and evil. So it's, again, not necessarily knowing the concepts of good and evil, but understanding the laws and understanding what God's ultimate plan is for mankind over the course of time. And so this is clear indication that God exists as more than one person. Here again, I've said that this is God the Son interacting with mankind, and it always is. And so you have God the Son talking to God the Father and God the Spirit here, and man has become like them in what they know, in their maturity and their knowledge of these things. So the child has watched what he should not have watched on TV, and now he knows some things that mom and dad did not want him to know, essentially. Forget about pagan sacrifices. Same thing. Oh, right. So you're talking about the animal sacrifices versus like the things that witches do and all that with the blood and all that kind of stuff. Genitarian monotheism. That's the biblical perspective. Yes, it is. So yeah, no, I get what you're saying, Heather. Yeah, people do freak out about the pagan sacrifices and stuff, and then you say, well, the Jews sacrificed animals, and then they just kind of stare at you blankly. That is absolutely a valid point. I would say that there's differences in it, and I think those differences are meaningful and they matter, but it's a little bit outside of the scope of what we're talking about here, though. I don't know. We could do a live about that. That would be fun. Hey, Nina. You are just catching the tail end of a discussion on Genesis 3 here. We're in verse 23. Or no, sorry, end of verse 22. So just 3 more verses here. So man has become as one of us to know good and evil, and now lest he put forth his hand and take also the tree of life and eat and live forever. See, that's the purpose of the tree of life, is if man continues to eat of this tree, he's going to live perpetually. If he has access to this tree, he's not going to die. Yeah, but and hey, Eddie, we're just wrapping up Genesis 3 here. But Stephen, it's been great. Look at all the people that are on and commenting. It's been a really good night. I'm very excited about it. So keep the comments coming. I'm loving it. So again, and I have an article, Swordmaster Publications. I can, if you PM me, I'll send you the link, or you can just go to swordmasterpublications.fandom.com. It used to be Wikia, but they changed it to Fandom, so now it looks like I'm a fanboy. But that's my commentary site, and there is you know what? I'll post a link below in the comments here when I get done to that article, The Purpose of the Tree of Life. But the purpose of the Tree of Life was to give mankind perpetual life. If you didn't eat of it, his body would eventually, entropy would take over, because entropy is part of the universe. We know from physics that no processes can happen if entropy is not operating. And so mankind would eventually keel over and die. Man is removed from the tree of life, and so he's eventually going to die because of it. Therefore Jehovah God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man. He placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. So for 1,500 years, that's cool, Abby. Just when you get a chance, would love to hear your comments when you get a chance to read to watch through. Sean, we're just wrapping up here, but you are more than welcome to comment if you watch back through it here. So for 1,500 years here, the Garden of Eden is guarded by these cherubims, and this flaming sword. So it isn't just Adam and Eve that know it's there. Cain and Abel know it's there. Seth knows it's there. Enoch knows it's there. Methuselah knows it's there. All of these people up until Noah know it's there. They know the cherubim is there. They know the flaming sword is there. They know the tree of life is there. And I wouldn't be surprised if they could even see it there in the garden, but they can't access it. They're no longer allowed to go there and eat, because if they eat of it, then it would give them that perpetual life. And that's the consequence of Adam's sin. Doesn't mean that everybody shares his guilt. Ezekiel 18:20 says that the son is not guilty of the father's sin, but we do deal with the consequences of our sin, just like our children deal with the consequences. Heather and I believe in gentle parenting. We believe that if we're constantly yelling at our kids and mad at our kids, when really the problem lies with us most of the time, our own frustration, or we're putting our own desires first, that we take that out on the kids, and the kids learn that behavior. That's a consequence. That doesn't mean that the kids did anything wrong, but it does mean that they suffer the consequences of our bad choices. And so the environment that came about after the fall of man is absolutely a consequence of Adam's sin. We just do not inherit the actual guilt or the depravity or any of those types of things. And I'm about to have a discussion, hopefully here in the next few weeks, with some friends of mine online about this. And I've been talking to it in conversations and text and stuff. But anyway, so that's Genesis 3. We'll get into Genesis 4. We'll talk about where Cain got his wife from, and we'll probably talk about some things that, that's in Genesis 6. We'll talk about the Nephilim and how everybody gets the story of the Nephilim wrong and stuff like that. I guess I could leave this question here. Where did Satan come from? He is absolutely never in heaven. He is absolutely not a fallen angel. He is absolutely a created being. But do we know anything else about his origins? So we can talk about that in the comments. I'll leave that for discussion. I have to wonder how the genetic code gets altered by our environment, and that is passed down. Yeah, definitely. You've got diseases. The original idea behind viruses was actually to correct genetic anomalies. And because the viruses themselves were corrupted, they make us sick now. Whereas before, they were there to help fix the problems. So there are absolutely a lot of physical problems that are passed down, but that does not mean any guilt of sin or any kind of depravity or inability to respond to God's message is passed down. And so that's kind of what I was saying. But that's a great question. It's a great idea of how the biology and the environment interact and have fallen. So really appreciate everybody jumping in here tonight. Really good discussion, lots of really good questions and talk. And I look forward to doing more of these. I don't know where this is going to go. I'm not always going to be going straight through the Bible. Like I want to do the dinosaur thing. I probably will do the dinosaur topic next. So that means we're not going to do Genesis 4 next. We're going to do the dinosaurs next, just because I really want to talk about that. But if you have any topics that you want to talk about with me, you're welcome to leave me a comment or send me a private message. And I really, really appreciate everybody being here tonight. And we will see y'all next time.